So, hi, Janet. Thank you for speaking with me tonight.
Hi.
If I just start by telling you who we are. So, Suportal is an information service for parents of children and young people with special needs and disabilities. And what we're aiming to do is raise awareness for as many support services as possible out there. So that's why we asked to speak with you today. So if you'd just like to tell me a bit about Portage, like the history of it and your role and why you chose to be a part of the charity.
Okay, so my name's Janet Rickman, and I'm presently chairman of the National Portage Association, which we call the MPA for short, because it's rather a mouthful. The MPA is an umbrella organisation that exists to guarantee a quality framework for service delivery and to develop and run training for Portage practitioners and early years practitioners. So I came into it a very long time ago when it first came to this country, which was in 1976, and did one of the first workshops that was held in this country, run by a very eminent clinical psychologist called John Clements, who was one of the people that brought it over here from the States. And it was at that time that I thought this is a very inspirational way of working, because I was managing a large day nursery that had what was called a special care unit, because at that time we didn't educate children with special needs or disabilities. And we started introducing this model of teaching, and we had this little girl who had cerebral palsy, and we had no idea what she was able to do. But by assessing her and working closely with her parents, she was able to point to body parts and things.
Wow.
Like that. It was just inspirational to realise that she was able to tell us what she understood and knew. So I thought, this is the model of teaching for me.
Oh, that's amazing. So rewarding as well, I imagine.
Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah. So I then became a full-time Portage practitioner in Croydon, which is a London borough, and became team leader there, and then moved across to become team leader in the London borough of Bromley. So I managed two very large Portage teams.
So on your website, it says that Portage is a home visiting educational service for preschool children with special educational needs and disabilities and their families. So can you tell me a little bit about how that works, like the home visits and things? Like, what do you do?
Okay, so the Portage services are run by different local authorities usually. They can be run by anybody, so they're usually local authorities and usually the education department within those. There are some that are run by charities and some that are run by health. And they all deliver Portage in a very slightly different way. Some will offer weekly home visits, some will offer fortnightly, some will offer blocks of visits and then a gap. So it very much depends on what the local offer is and what parents want. So the way that it works is that anybody can refer a child into a Portage service. And the criteria for a Portage service is that the child should have a disability or difficulties in two or more areas of development. Because if it was just speech and language, then obviously the speech and language therapists are experts in that field. But as we know, for most children, if they've got difficulties, great difficulties in one area, then it often impacts on their overall development.
Yes.
So, as I say, anybody can refer in, to have permission from the parent to be able to refer into a service. From there, a member of the team would do an initial visit to the family, the purpose of which is to establish whether that child actually does meet the criteria for the service, and also to check whether the parent actually wants it, because the way that we work is, one of our principles is that we work in partnership with parents and we see them very much as the senior partner. So they have to be on board from the beginning and understand what they're committing to. if it's agreed that they would receive Portage home visits, then they are allocated a Portage practitioner, often, sadly, after quite a long waiting list, depending on where they are, but most services have a waiting list. And then the first thing that the Portage practitioner would do would be to carry out a holistic assessment of that child's abilities, because this is very much a service that looks for success, and we look at what children can do rather than what they can't do. So the first thing we would do usually is to complete a checklist of development with a parent or carer, because they're the ones that know the children best. So we know what they know what their children can do. But we also work very much in partnership with other agencies. So a lot of the children that we work with will be supported by speech and language therapists, physiotherapists, and like a whole range of professionals. So it's important that we get information from them as well, to know where this child is developmentally. So once we've done that, and alongside that, we would be carrying out play sessions with the child, because we want it to be fun for them, as all learning should be fun. And then once we know where that child is, we would be taking toys into the family and have a play session with the child and the parent, because one of our aims is to empower parents to understand their child's needs and how to meet them. So this is very much a partnership, working with the family and choosing toys that they think that is the next step for their child's development. We would then agree with the parent or carer what activities they would be doing with their child in between our visits to promote the skills. And then we would ask them to carry out those activities just for 5 or 10 minutes, once or twice a day. And we try to design them so that they fit in with the family. So the activities may be open-ended, which means that they are there just to give the child opportunities to play, but with a little bit of focus. So it could be in any area of development. So it might be communication, it might be gross motor skills, it might be social skills, it could be absolutely anything, as long as it's important to that family and that's what they see as their next step. But we then sometimes use outcome focused activities where we ask parents to actually record their child's progress, so we can see whether how the skills are developing. So we would do that for perhaps 6 or 8 weeks, something like that. And then we would agree with parents long-term goals. So goals that we hope that the child would be able to achieve within about 3 to 4 months. And then all the weekly activities are designed around achieving those goals, so that we set goals for every area of development where the child might have a delay or difficulty. So by setting the goals, we make sure that we're working on all of those areas and don't get stuck just focusing on speech and language or physical development. And at that time, we would also obviously be taking advice from other agencies as to what they feel is the next step for this child's development.
We've had a question in asking what a typical Portage session would look like, but it sounds as though there's a lot of variety on a case-by-case basis there. So is there a typical session, or?
Well, a typical session would be that we would take in a bag of toys that we've matched that child's developmental levels. Everybody sits on the floor or sits wherever is appropriate for the child and plays together. So and we encompass the whole family. So if there's a younger child that wants to join in, then that's absolutely fine. Quite often there's grandma sitting in the corner wanting to know all about it. I've done visits with cats and dogs on my lap, that kind of thing, because, as I say, we're in the house for about an hour or so, but the true learning takes place in the interim between our visits. So there's no point agreeing with a family that they would carry out an activity if they're having to do it when their other child is there or the dog is there. So we have to design everything that we do around that. So we would have a play session, and during that session we would be talking to the parent about, so what skill is it that you want to be developing? What should we be working on? The Portage home visitor then writes it down as a reminder to the family as to what's going to happen, because it shouldn't just be that one parent. It could be anybody that comes in that wants to play with the child. Then they can be focusing a little bit on the activities that we've agreed to do. And then most services will lend the toy or piece of equipment necessary to carry out those activities that we then collect back. And then when we go back the following week, we talk to the parent about how that week's activities have gone, whether they want to continue working on the same skill or do something different, have another play session, and then agree more activities. And then we just carry on like that. But a big part of our work is also family focus. So it could be that we are talking to a parent that week about what benefits might be appropriate for them to apply for, or we might be talking about the next step of education, or we might even be talking about something not connected with that child, but that's important to that family. So our service really is based on three things: child-led play, because as I said, we want this child to have a lovely time and enjoy playing. Structured teaching, so that's when we're actually recording the activities so that we can see whether the child is making progress, and family focus. But it's a dynamic model, so it's not that we have a third of it for this and a third of it for that. It might be one week it's all child-led play, and another week it might be all family focus. But we're keeping notes so that we can see if we're suddenly doing more about family focus. So is it appropriate to make referrals to other agencies to support that area for that family?
Okay. So is there a common age or condition that the children have or are, and that you work with? Or?
So children can be referred from any age. So actually we sometimes have children referred before they're born if they've been diagnosed or it's been identified that they've got a chromosome abnormality, Down syndrome. And services can work with children up until they start school. So children can be referred at any time during that period. Although it is true to say now that most children, if they're already in a preschool or in a nursery, probably wouldn't get referred into Portage. They would get more support in whatever educational setting that they're in. So yeah, from very young to up to 5. And as I said, our criteria is any child that's got delays or difficulties in 2 or more areas of development. So they don't have to have a diagnosis at all. It can just be that it's been identified that they've got those needs. The kind of children that we work with have changed over the years. When I first started, about a third of our children had Down syndrome. There's not so many with that diagnosis now. We have a lot of children that have got social communication difficulties, some of whom do go on to get a diagnosis of autism. But as I say, the diagnosis isn't important to us.
Yeah. We've had a question asking how many of your services are still running, because it's been heard that a lot of local authorities have pulled your service, which is a shame.
Yes, it is a shame, yeah. There's currently over 100 registered services, but I do know that there are other services out there that actually aren't registered with us, which again is fine. It just means that they're harder to find. But you're absolutely right. Some local authorities have pulled services, but also there have been some new services, because the MPA, we did have grants from the Department for Education specifically to support local authorities to set up new services. So it's a changing picture, really. Some new ones and some old ones that have gone. And some look like they've gone, but actually haven't, but they've just been subsumed into a broader early years service. So they're not actually recognised as a separate service. Yeah. But there's still not enough services out there.
Yeah, I can imagine. There never is. So could you tell me what you think Portage's greatest achievements are?
I think it is that we've got a very good quality framework, so that our registered services have to adhere to that framework. We have a set of principles that we want everybody to use to guarantee that we are delivering a good service to children and families. And we also develop training. So to become a Portage home visitor, we expect people to have a good knowledge of child development, of typical child development. They then do a 3-day workshop which teaches them the principles of Portage. And then if they become a Portage practitioner, then they get on-the-job training, really. We've got an induction program that they use. We've also changed our training because we do realise now that not everybody that does a Portage workshop is going to be a Portage practitioner. So it's more in line with the early years foundation stage. So it's appropriate for early years practitioners to attend as well. So we've done a lot of work around that, because actually, although this model of teaching is designed for children with additional needs, actually it's a very good model for everybody teaching, because it is based on a small step approach to learning, really, and a can do, like looking at what a child or a person can do and then breaking the skills down into very small achievable steps that are appropriate for that child.
And what are the charities plans for the future, like budgetary? What next for Portage?
Okay, so we're still developing that training. What we want to do is to get more into the nursery chains so that we can train their practitioners, because, as I've said, at one time there wasn't very much going on for children, and I'm sure parents know this. Like when I started, children with additional needs didn't go anywhere, but now our children and families are very busy, and most do attend a mainstream early years setting. So we think it's important that those early years practitioners understand how to meet the needs of those children with identified needs, as well as all of the other children that are in their care.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think what you're doing is amazing, so thank you. I just wish I'd been a part of it when I was the right age.
It is an amazing thing, and people do stay as Portage practitioners for a very long time, and parents stay in touch with us and use the principles that we've taught them to support their child as they grow as well. So yeah, we're very proud of it.
I can see why. Well, anyway, thank you very much for speaking with me.
Okay, thank you, Olivia.
Thank you.
Okay.
Nice to see you.
And you. Thank you very much. Take care.
And
Bye-bye. Bye.